Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. Today there is a square aspect between the Sun and Uranus. And I thought, great, got something to talk about today, Sun square Uranus. But, yesterday I talked about Mercury square Uranus, and so I thought maybe I'd consider something different. And my first dog, her name was Cuvi, was born in the end of 2008, and she had Sun square Uranus, and she died in August 2022 when the Sun was square Uranus. And so, well, that's a good opportunity to talk about the horoscope of a dog, to talk about the horoscope of a pet. And I wanted to use, of course, you're not supposed to call dogs pets anymore, you're supposed to call them companion animals, aren't you? And I thought, yes, this was an example of a dog's horoscope, and the reason I'm going to use this example is just to illustrate that it really is worthwhile looking at your dog's horoscope. Maybe your cat's horoscope as well, if you have you might not have the time of birth, but you might have the day of birth. It is a useful exercise, and it's not just about getting an idea about the dog's personality, kind of difficult sometimes to work that out, but also to look at the events in a dog's life. And that is my message. It's not just a trivial exercise to look at a dog's chart. It really can be useful, and it can tell you something about how the dog's life unfolds. But before I talk about Cuvi and Sun square Uranus and the details of her chart, I want to consider the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. Just a reminder, if you happen to like this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to indicate this, and if you are not subscribed, as usual, I would be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And so the chart for today is starting to be dominated by a full moon. We have the moon in Leo, and the moon is starting to move to an opposition of the Sun in Aquarius. So yes, we have a Leo full moon forming. Did I say new moon? Full moon. I do that quite often. I mix up new moons, full moons in terms of what I say, but it's a full moon. So we've got build up to a full moon. And yeah, that is probably the main thing going on. It's not as intense as it's going to be tomorrow, but we're starting to feel that pressure. And when you're talking about moon in Leo, Sun in Aquarius, that can be about the dichotomy between the individual wanting to be independent, valuing ourselves, perhaps being a little bit egotistical with moon in Leo, but Sun in Aquarius represents something else, perhaps the other. And as always, full moons can be about a sense of the truth, and that's what we might feel. We might have ideas which are very dear to ourselves, but then the full moon reminds us sometimes that we haven't necessarily got it right. And this full moon is going to be very linked with Uranus. Already today we have Sun square Uranus, and tomorrow with that full moon is going to be right on Uranus, and that's certainly something to talk about. And so tomorrow I will without doubt be talking about the full moon, because it could be quite powerful. And aside from that, the moon actually makes a trine to Venus, and so the moon in Leo is making a trine to Venus in Aries, and so that is perhaps a softer influence, especially at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in Australia and New Zealand. But, with the moon in Leo, Venus in Aries, there is a sense in which things are moving, at least on a social sense. And there is an idea of social excitement, and the moon is additionally making a sextile to Jupiter. Now, that sextile to Jupiter is possibly the main influence, perhaps more important than the moon trine moon trine Venus, especially if you're in the Americas. But maybe we can say the moon is making fortunate aspects to both the benefics, trine to Venus, sextile to Jupiter, and so as a result, it should be a fairly okay day, though the Sun square Uranus can't entirely be avoided. Sun square Uranus can be about things happening that we weren't expecting, or with the Sun in a fixed sign Aquarius, Uranus in a fixed sign Taurus, it can be about people who are quite opinionated, and we shouldn't forget that the Sun is conjunct Mercury. So yesterday we had Sun square Mercury. Sun conjunct Mercury today. It had to be over last weekend. The Sun was exactly conjunct Mercury, but it's still very close, that Sun-Mercury conjunction. So yesterday we had Sun square Mercury. Today we've got Sun. Sorry, let me say it again. Yesterday we had Mercury square Uranus. Today we've got Sun square Uranus. So that really stirs things up, and perhaps we should see it as a single aspect, Uranus square the Sun-Mercury conjunction. And that does stir things up, and as a result, things might happen that we hadn't necessarily planned for. And some people can be very obstinate because of the fixity of these squares. With Uranus in Taurus, Sun, Mercury in Aquarius, fixed signs, people don't want to compromise. And people's inability to compromise can often be the cause of explosions and flare-ups. And Mercury and Mars making a biquintile, 144 degrees apart. And so with Mercury-Mars biquintile, it's what we'd like to happen. We would like to be able to communicate with power and be able to tell people what's on our minds in no uncertain terms. And to begin with, though, we might feel a little bit tongue-tied as we try to work it out. What is the best approach? How are we going to be forceful? And so some of us might find ourselves planning our communications, working out how best to make an impact. It may not be entirely spontaneous, but that planning could be worth the effort. So that's a chart for New York at noon. Here's a chart for Sydney, Australia at noon. So the moon is at 4 degrees Leo, and it's still in Leo, very much in Leo. So if you are in Australia or New Zealand, you could say that the main lunar aspect is going to be moon trine Venus. If you're in the Americas, the main lunar aspect is going to be moon sextile Jupiter. So there's a very subtle difference between one's experience in Australasia and the Americas. Perhaps in Australasia, it's Australia, New Zealand, East Asia. It's more about other people and enjoying other people's company, and there being a certain sense of excitement when you're with other people. Moon in Leo, trine Venus in Aries, whereas in the Americas it's more about that moon sextile Jupiter. Other people might not be quite so important in the Americas and in Europe, and moon sextile Jupiter is, it's a lucky aspect. So is moon trine Venus. So it may actually, in practice, be difficult to tell the difference between moon trine Venus and moon sextile Jupiter. Then there is the heliocentric picture, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system, and heliocentrically we can see that Venus is moving towards a trine of Neptune. So Venus trine Neptune I would have said, is it's quite a subtle aspect. It may make some of us more sensitive than usual, and perhaps our psychic abilities will be more fine-tuned than they usually are. And in terms of other people, it's perhaps not a time to have sort of rigid boundaries, because it's just easy to cross those boundaries. Even if we don't physically cross those boundaries, the emotional flow is there to some extent. And this Venus trine Neptune is tied up a little bit with Mercury, because Mercury is semi-sextile Neptune. So Mercury semi-sextile Neptune is quite sensitive, like that Venus trine Neptune, but Mercury is about our conscious mind, how we're trying to work things out, and that semi-sextile Neptune may be somewhat confusing. And Mercury is actually making a square to Uranus as well. I mean, it's not an exact square, but in terms of what we're thinking and how we're thinking, there is a lot going on. There's a lot for us to work through, and there are lots of surprises there, and we might reach some conclusions that we weren't necessarily expecting. And yeah, there might be some realizations with Mercury making that square to Uranus. But we've got Mercury square Uranus geocentrically also, and we've got Sun square Uranus geocentrically, and that Sun square Uranus is geocentric. Sun square Uranus, I do think, is the most important aspect of the day. So let me now transition to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, February the 11th, 2025. Aries. Aries, you're probably on pretty good form. Things are moving. You have a certain sense of excitement that you can make things happen in a very sort of Aries, spontaneous kind of way. And that's probably the kind of news that Aries likes to hear. It is your kind of day, and things are moving. Okay, tomorrow we've got a full moon, and the full moon tomorrow might create a few complications, but don't worry about it. I mean, as an Aries, try to live for the moment. And with that moon trine Venus, from a relationship point of view, I would have thought it should be quite useful. I mean, Venus is in Aries. Venus is a planet of relationships, and Venus is in your sign, so your ability to relate to other people should be very good. And you're helped by the fact that you just come over as being an exciting person who is full of ideas. It's not ideas. We have to think about what does that mean? Ideas. Aries is not just about ideas. Aries is about taking an idea and being ready to act on it, and that's certainly something you can do. And there is a certain spontaneity to you today, a spontaneity which you may have felt that recently you've been lacking. Somehow things have just been a little bit complicated. Mars is in Cancer. Mars is your ruler. It's retrograde. It's in a low-profile part of your chart, and that might have diminished your normal spontaneity. But today, you do seem to be perking up, and you can be helped by other people. And also, the moon, having made that trine to Venus, it moves on to make a sextile to Jupiter. Moon sextile Jupiter is a great aspect, and it's an aspect you can benefit from. And the sextile is an aspect that in some ways relates to talent, and it is about you being able to tune into your talent and at the same time be able to talk about it. Let people know what you want to do, and your verbal skills today would appear to be really very good. I mean, certainly that moon sextile Jupiter helps, but there are other things going on which allow the words to flow, and the things you say are uplifting. People need to be uplifted. And you know what to say. And so, Aries, you just have this capacity for being positive. And I think I should leave it there, because if I keep on talking, I'm just going to find something negative to say. But I don't want to do that. I want to keep it positive. And overall, Aries, I think it looks like being a really powerful day. 5 stars out of 5, so enjoy it. Taurus. Moon is making a trine to Venus, and this moon trine Venus does look pretty good. It allows you to relax. It allows you to just feel comfortable and to believe maybe that you're in the right place at the right time. There can just be that moment where it feels that everything is right, and that you don't have to try, and you don't have to strive, that you can be happy that you've done what you have to do, you're in the right place, there's no need to worry about moving somewhere else, there's no need to have doubts about the wisdom of your actions. You can just be settled. And that's certainly one approach to the day. There should be no sense of obligation. And you could just leave it like that. But the moon does also make a sextile to Jupiter. That moon sextile Jupiter, you could say, is optional. You could ignore it. But moon sextile Jupiter, it's a fortunate aspect, and it's an aspect that does have a certain financial basis to it. And if you have the chance, you may be able to use your many talents as a way of getting more money, earning more money, finding some money, finding some possibility of boosting your feeling of financial security. Again, moon sextile Jupiter. And it's fortunate, but it's not an aspect that is talking about something just dropping on your lap from nowhere, sort of a bunch of $100 bills or the equivalent in your local currency. It's not quite like that. It is a sextile. Sextiles do require some work. So moon sextile Jupiter can be about an opportunity, and it's kind of up to you how you deal with that opportunity. Now, so far, in terms of what I've said, I kind of want to emphasize the fact that there is no obligation. I talked about that moon trine Venus. You don't have to really go beyond your comfort zone if you don't want to. Yet one cannot avoid the fact that today the Sun is square Uranus. This can be an important aspect. And it kind of depends what you're doing. If you stay at home and do nothing, then this Sun square Uranus is not something you have to worry about. But if you are leading an active life and you're in lots of different places, and if you've got a career to worry about, you're going into work, you're having to deal with people, even if you don't have a career, if you've got something you're trying to do that involves other people, that Sun square Uranus could cut in. And it sounds rather destabilizing, Sun square Uranus, but I actually don't think it need be, because Uranus is in Taurus. So because Uranus is in Taurus, that does mean that you have a certain amount of control over what is happening. Uranus in Taurus is about It's about your revolution, what you want to change. And it's been brewing for quite a few years. And so with Sun square Uranus, that might give you the option to create change and to have a dramatic impact. Now, as a Taurus, you might be somewhat wary of that. You might be wondering, is that the right thing to do? What would happen if you did it? What would the consequences be with that Sun square Uranus? And it is up to you. But if you want to create change, and if you want to create drama, you feel it is important, you certainly can. And if we link Sun square Uranus with Moon sextile Jupiter, it might be actually about opportunity. An opportunity comes your way, and it's quick. It requires fast thinking, and you have to make a decision. Do you take the risk? Do you not take the risk? And if you go with it, if you go with the energy of Sun square Uranus, then I think that you may be able to do something that really improves your situation. And it could not just improve your situation, but it could actually cause a really quite dramatic change. And in most cases, I do believe, Taurus, that it will be a change for the better. Though do remember, it is the run-up to the full moon. The full moon is going to have an impact on you. That full moon is full moon in Leo across one of the main axes of your solar chart. When you look at, for example, your homework balance, if that's relevant, if you're working, if you're looking at your relationship to the wider world, think about it. Think about how it's changing, how it's perhaps under a little bit of pressure. You don't have to do anything today, though. You don't. Moon is trine Venus. Moon is sextile Jupiter. You can just watch, observe, enjoy your own company, and that can be today. Though, is that the right thing to do? It would be a shame if you completely miss that Sun square Uranus, because that Sun square Uranus does give you a chance to change things, and I think change things very much for the better. Gemini. Mercury is still making a square to Uranus. I mean, yesterday Mercury was making the exact square to Uranus, but that square is still there, and we have the Sun, Mercury, and Uranus closely bound together. And if you want to get into the jargon, you can say, well, the Sun is making a semi-square to the Mercury-Uranus midpoint. So yeah, the Sun, Mercury, Uranus all together, and that means, Gemini, that it is a day in which there is a lot of action, and you feel tense. But not necessarily tense in a bad way. Sometimes it's good to be tense. I mean, tense means that you're ready for action. You're able to do things if need be. And also, if you're tense, it means that you're not complacent, and you're ready to show a new side to your personality. And that can be Mercury square Uranus, allowing yourself to see possibilities and also to communicate possibilities. And there may actually be an experimental side to today, and that can actually be a feature of Geminis, doing something just to see what happens. You have no idea how it's going to work. And if you do something and it doesn't work, well, you could say, well, that was a shame, that was a waste of time. But on the other hand, if you do something and it doesn't work, that is giving you information. And it's almost giving you satisfaction, because you now know that you tried it. At least you tried it. It didn't work out. There is that phrase, try everything once, except, I won't continue with the quotation, but, it's that most things non-destructive should be tried once, and that might be a certain temptation with Geminis to try something. And with Mercury square Uranus, there is a sense that you want to do something with your tension and explore new areas, and also explore new ideas. You shouldn't be fixed. You shouldn't be fixed on one idea, one concept. And Mercury square Uranus may actually create a revelation. You realize that perhaps you got something wrong. And today we've got Sun square Uranus, and Sun square Uranus could be about your ideas, what you believe is true, what you thought was true. And Sun square Uranus, it comes along and undermines it all, and that's a good thing. And then the moon is in Leo, but the moon is moving towards an opposition with the sun. So that moon opposition sun is by definition, that is a full moon. And so tomorrow's full moon is starting, and that full moon is going to put pressure on you, I believe. It's about you having to take into account facts which you didn't really want to consider. And when you look at those facts, and when you accept those facts, you have a moment of realization. You realize that something can't happen. Or you realize that something really is possible, that it really can be realized in the real world. But it is about realization. And when we look at today, we should really see today and tomorrow as part of the same action. It's all about that full moon, but this is the beginning of a full moon. It is about this beginning of this process of realization. But before the full moon, and today, the day before the full moon, moon is sextile Jupiter, and moon sextile Jupiter I would have regarded as a great aspect for you, Gemini, because Gemini is moving through your sign, and moon is making a sextile to Gemini. So that means that you're going to be a fairly exciting person, and you'll have absolutely no problems expressing yourself. And there are certain people, Gemini, who are just going to think that you are amazing. I mean, give them a chance. Show what you can do. And it's not a time, Gemini, to be shy. And there's no risk here. I mean, what risk? The biggest risk is someone demonstrating that you're wrong. I mean, sometimes you are wrong, and you just have to accept that. You're not right about everything. But in general, with that moon sextile Jupiter, and also the moon is actually making a sextile, making a trine to Venus. That sextile to Jupiter, trine to Venus, should be very good for relationships, whatever the relationship is. Okay, they're not particularly emotional aspects, but they're about being able to sort of get on with people and to be excited by other people. Cancer. The full moon is pretty close now. It's tomorrow, and I would have thought you can really feel it. You can feel the distinctions between things. Some things are different from others, and not everyone can agree with each other. If there's any conflict around you, then Cancer, I would have thought that conflict is going to be fairly clear It's certainly becoming clear. And that doesn't mean to say that we're talking about an actual argument, but it's just an awareness that you and other people perhaps see things in a different way, and there might be some quite fundamental differences here, which just can't just be brushed under the carpet. But just because you realize something doesn't mean to say that you have to act on it. And the full moon is tomorrow, and today, in the run up to the full moon, it's a slightly different picture, because the full moon by definition is a moon opposition to the sun, and we can see the moon is in Leo, starting to move towards that opposition with the sun in Aquarius. But today we have moon trine Venus, we have moon sextile Jupiter, and that means that the moon is making favourable aspects to the benefics. Venus is the lesser benefic, Jupiter is the greater benefic, and those aspects are going to be very supporting and perhaps even uplifting. You get a sense of what is possible, and it may be what is possible on quite a material level. I mean, don't be ashamed of worrying about material stuff, and because at the moment there are no planets in Earth signs except for Uranus, and so that can work in two different ways. It can be that people couldn't care less about money and material things, or it could be that there's a quest for compensation, feeling that something is missing, and this may be about you. You may feel materially a little bit dislocated from the material world, and it would be nice if you got some evidence that the material world existed in terms of perhaps rewards. And the moon trine Venus and the moon sextile Jupiter do suggest that there are ways of getting hold of money, or getting hold of something material that you feel perhaps that you need, and it can happen. And it's not about spending money. I suppose it could be about spending money, but that's not the best way of using those two aspects. I mean, okay, moon trine Venus, you could say that's overindulgence, financial overindulgence, but I don't think so. Not in this case. I think that moon trine Venus is more about you being dynamic, but also being quite responsible. And because you're dynamic and responsible, you do have a chance to improve the overall situation in a financial way. And that means, Cancer, that in many cases you are the most sensible person in the room. And another aspect to consider is Sun square Uranus. Yesterday there was Mercury square Uranus. Now you've got Sun square Uranus. I would have said that Sun square Uranus, Mercury square Uranus, they're part of the same movement. They're part of the same configuration. And so that could be about things working on quite a deeper level. And there are things you want to work through on your own, but they might get triggered by what you see around you, by something someone says. I mean, Uranus in Taurus might relate to your social life, to a friend, what a friend says to you, or an associate, someone you know says something, could be innocuous, but it starts a process, and you privately fight against it. You think, no, that's not right, that doesn't seem to work. And so Sun square Uranus might for you be sort of some kind of private revelation where you start to see something and you start to understand something. It took a long time to get, but finally the penny drops. Of course in America we're about to lose pennies, aren't we? Donald Trump has said that he wants to phase out pennies because 1 cent, because a penny in the UK is 1p. I think there are still pennies in the UK, and of course a 1 cent piece is called a penny in America. So yeah, Donald Trump wants to get rid of pennies because they cost 2 or 3 cents to make, and obviously they're only worth 1 cent. And so yeah, still the penny might drop. Sorry about that diversion. And so you might get something, you finally get it, and it's absolutely clear, and you don't have to tell anyone, you don't have to tell someone that you really understand it, but privately you get it. And of course tomorrow we have the full moon, and with the full moon things really are crystal clear. But I'll be talking about the full moon when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, which is Wednesday. Leo, Sun square Uranus. The Sun is your ruler and it is square Uranus. And that is an important aspect for a couple of reasons. Obviously, the Sun is your ruler. And so when your ruler makes a square to Uranus, it's a big event. It's about a surprise, or it's about maybe you digging your heels in. That can be how Sun square Uranus works. Uranus can be a very stubborn energy, and when you decide that you're going to do something, you do it, and you are not prepared to compromise. So that's one way of looking at Sun square Uranus. It affects you because it's your ruler. It also affects you because the Sun is in Aquarius. The Sun is in your opposite sign. And traditionally, Sun in Aquarius is actually not the greatest place for the Sun to be, because the Sun rules Leo and it's in its detriment in Aquarius. And yeah, it's square Uranus. And at first sight, this Sun square Uranus might occur to you in a somewhat debilitating way. Something happens, or you have some realization, and you might feel that you're at a disadvantage. Sun is in Aquarius, Sun is in your opposite sign. It might be that you feel that you're not in full control, and events are really emphasizing the fact that you're not in full control, and you just might feel that things are somewhat running away with you, and you might then have to respond, and you have to respond by making it clear that you are in control. But how are you going to do this? There's some danger that you take things too far. You're just too keen to make a noise, but you don't have to make a noise necessarily. And it might actually be a situation, Leo, with the Sun square Uranus, where you have to run with it. I mean, at least that would be the best way of dealing with the situation. People and events might want to move in a particular direction. You might not be comfortable moving in this direction, but it might not be a good idea to stop it happening, at least to begin with. And perhaps, Leo, it's about letting something develop. You don't want to let it develop because you're concerned, where actually would it lead? But if you were to let it develop, then I don't think you'd actually be damaged, particularly if you're not engaged. You don't give an opinion. You just let things move in whatever way they want to go. I mean, obviously within reason. You don't want to be dragged off a cliff. You're not a lemming. But sometimes it's best just to watch for the time being. Now tomorrow there is a full moon, and that full moon is something I need to sort of discuss in detail. But and with that full moon, there might be a moment of realization where you understand what's happening. And it's just that right now you might not understand, but you're in the process of understanding. And today there is something about you that is very inspired. But just because you're feeling inspired doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be acting on that inspiration. We have, you've got this. The Sun is making a conjunction to Mercury. The Sun and Mercury are making squares to Uranus, and so those three planets, Sun, Mercury, Uranus, really tightly configured, and that's what I mean by the inspiration. You really are starting to see things, but have you seen everything? Maybe not quite yet, and it just may be a couple of days before the whole picture becomes clear. So in that sense, Leo, stay with it. Don't necessarily feel that you have to do anything, because right now you can see most of the picture, but perhaps not all the picture. Virgo. Mercury was square Uranus yesterday, and today Mercury is moving away from that square to Uranus to some extent. But that Mercury square Uranus is still pretty immediate, and as a result you might be feeling a little bit nervous. I mean, you don't know what's going on, and the atmosphere is somewhat thick. You can almost touch the atmosphere. It's a tense atmosphere, and it's not a threatening atmosphere. It just feels tense, and it's important, Virgo, that you recognize that it's not your problem. It really isn't. It's just the world in which you are living, and that's just the way it is. And so with Mercury square Uranus, you have a chance to see things, to understand things, and as you see things, as you understand things, you start feeling that you should be doing something. You need to respond. It may just feel that there's actually a certain sense of urgency, and you feel that if you don't do something, then maybe something bad will happen. Or it might be the case that you feel that a change is necessary, that there are so many restrictions, so many things holding you up, that something has to give, and you may want it to give, and you might just want to push things so that they just fall over, because that might be the best way of making progress. Now, Virgo, it's important that you don't take things too far, and some of these feelings of tension relate to, well, perhaps the fact we've got a full moon coming up, as well as the fact, of course, we've got the Sun and Mercury square Uranus. So it is a tense environment, but I must emphasize it shouldn't be tense just for you. You should not personalize it. And ideally, you should make the most of the planetary energy. Just try to look at the positives. Now, don't get me wrong. Mercury square Uranus is a very positive aspect. It can be a very positive aspect. It can make you inspired. It can give you new information. When you first get that information, you may not be entirely comfortable with it, but you're finding out the truth, and you're giving yourself the opportunity to make the most of everything you've got. So it's not a bad aspect, Mercury square Uranus, but it would be a good idea to concentrate, if you can, on some of the more pleasant things going on today. And the moon is making a trine to Venus. The moon is making a sextile to Jupiter. And this, if you're in Australia or New Zealand, then probably that moon trine Venus is going to be more important. If you're in the Americas or Europe, certainly Americas, then it's more about that moon sextile Jupiter. Perhaps in Europe, you can, if you can feel both, but in general, the moon making those aspects to benefics allows you to get a sense of perspective. It also, particularly about moon trine Venus, can allow you to relax and not feel that pressure. You can somehow get around that pressure with moon trine Venus, and perhaps other people's company, the right people's company, can be useful. Now, moon sextile Jupiter is an aspect that allows you to do things which benefit yourself and benefit your ambitions. And they're the kind of things that do not have to be announced. You can do things privately, without being seen. And because you're not seen, you don't have to explain yourself. And so if you can get yourself into a situation where you don't have to explain, you just do what feels right, and perhaps with that moon sextile Jupiter, you can prepare. And in the end, you'll see the advantages. And moon sextile Jupiter could also have a link with relationships, and moon sextile Jupiter is perhaps about being able to create a situation where you and someone else can really get on with each other, for whatever reason. It might be about someone who you need to be in touch with, who can help you at a later stage, maybe in a career or a material sense, and you perhaps have to do some preparation. So that could actually be how the moon sextile Jupiter is working. Libra, the moon is making a trine to Venus. Venus is your ruler, and so that moon trine Venus should be quite a sociable aspect. It allows you to get on with people. It allows you to smoothly communicate, and you feel to an extent supported by that moon trine Venus. And how do you get that kind of support? Well, you shouldn't regard any one person as being the solution to anything, and consider some of the people around you. Some people are going to be more reassuring, comforting, and useful than others, and with that moon trine Venus, you can make that choice, and you can benefit from socializing. Your various social activities can work well, and then the moon, actually, it makes a trine to Venus, and then it moves on to make a sextile to Jupiter. And so those two aspects are very helpful at whatever level you want to see them. I mean, they could be helpful just on a personal level, just having a nice day. Your enjoyment of today can be improved by your association with the right people. But you might have ambitions. There might be things you want to achieve, in which case I think there's actually a very good chance that you can achieve them. Not necessarily on your own, but with other people's help. And it may occur to you that the real key to success is getting on with people and being able to network with them. That whole concept of networking, which people kind of overuse that sort of networking, but networking does matter today, and you have a chance to make connections today. And it was the case yesterday as well, which I think I talked about when I talked about talked about your horoscope for Monday. But it continues today, and your ability to network is great, and you, to an extent, Libra, you understand what people want, and it's very much about who you are and your personality, and you actually seem to be the right person in the right place, and that's great. Though I should point out that the Sun is square Uranus. It is an important aspect. It's not an easy aspect, and it's quite a challenging aspect. It represents things happening that you are not entirely happy about, and it might even be about realizations that you're not happy about. So if something feels uncomfortable, your first impression might be, well, let's get out of here. This is not something you want to involve yourself with. But actually, you're being given an opportunity because, Sun in Aquarius, square Uranus. Something is challenging you to make the most of what you've got. And it's easy to be lazy. It's easy to be saying, well, you're quite satisfied, you don't need anything more. But there is something else, something extra that you can bring in. And once you get through that challenge, perhaps even a little bit of fear, and you realize what's involved, you will see an opportunity and you can take things to the next level. As I think you might discover tomorrow, because tomorrow we've got a full moon, and that full moon is very much about your creativity and how best to harness that creativity. But I'll be talking about that tomorrow when I do your horoscope for Wednesday. Scorpio. At the moment, Scorpio, you do want things to happen. You feel that they should be happening, and there may actually be a certain sense of hurry. You might feel that you haven't got all the time in the world, and it really is time to get going. And at the same time, Scorpio, you just might be aware of some of the things that actually could be holding you back. And there are a lot of things that could hold you back, that could prevent you from achieving some of your ambitions. I mean, that's certainly possible. But is it necessary? No, I don't think it is. You just have to be open-minded and, not feel that anything is just too dramatic to deal with. And part of this may be the fact that we've got this run up to the full moon. So, tomorrow we have the full moon. You can feel this full moon already. The moon is in Leo, Sun is in Aquarius, the Sun and the moon are in opposite signs. You can see that there are certain things which are obliging you. These things might relate, for example, to your family or domestic arrangements, and you might just realize that you have to maybe listen to what another family member says, or you might have to just deal with something going on at home and you don't want to do it, and you might feel that it's just getting in your way, but it needn't get in your way. I mean, that would be unnecessary, and you just need to just be able to just move on and try to be flexible. The moon is in Leo, the Sun is in Aquarius. These are fixed signs, and they can be too fixed. Too fixed means not being able to see the possibility of change. But if you can just keep moving, then I think that you have a chance to deal with things. And the moon in Leo does make a trine to Venus, and this moon trine Venus, especially strong if you're in Australia or New Zealand, but I think all of us, wherever you are going to be feeling this moon trine Venus, is about being able to benefit from other people's help. And you might feel that you have to do everything on your own, that you're not going to get any support, that it's all down to you, and you might even be quite stubborn about it. no point in asking anyone's help. If someone offers help, just going to reject it anyway because they don't know what they're doing. But if you're actually prepared to engage other people's help, listen to their advice with that moon trine Venus, and perhaps delegate a bit of responsibility with, then soon enough you'll realize that you did the right thing. And then the moon, having made a trine to Venus, makes a sextile to Jupiter. So moon sextile Jupiter is about you really having a good understanding of what is happening. And when I say what is happening, I don't mean at the level of the material world, what we can see and touch. It's more about the currents going underneath, the kind of thing that Scorpios are very good at being aware of. And with that moon sextile Jupiter, you can benefit from your insights. And however uncertain you feel, you shouldn't feel you can't do it. Because, if you're feeling uncertain about something, it's a fair bet that other people are feeling uncertain about it as well. And so, if other people, for example, are behaving strangely, or they behave in ways that don't make sense, perhaps what they're demonstrating is the fact that they don't know. And Scorpio, you do know. Well, if anyone knows, Scorpio, I think you do. And so, Scorpio, it's a day for accepting the fact we've got to build up to a full moon, accepting the fact that the sun is square Uranus, and that can be quite destabilizing. But it's the same for everyone. And what you have, that perhaps what other people don't have, is awareness. And by the way, talking about relationships, if relationships do interest you, moon trine Venus. Moon trine Venus is a great aspect, and that can allow you to get on with people and find out perhaps that you've got things in common with them, and at the same time being able to tune into people's weaknesses. People do have weaknesses, and maybe you can go some way towards helping them out, especially as Mars continues to be pretty close to a square of Chiron, and Chiron, wounded healer, and it can be about you, if that's how you see Chiron. You can perhaps perceive another person's problem and take action, perhaps fairly dramatic action, to help to sort it out. Sagittarius, we have a sextile aspect between the moon and Jupiter, and I would regard this sextile between moon and Jupiter as being a good thing, especially from a Sagittarian perspective. This moon sextile Jupiter aspect allows you to be far-sighted. You can move beyond the immediate situation and consider the possibilities. And this also relates to the people you meet. You don't have to have a one-dimensional view of anyone. In fact, today, Sagittarius, you're going to be quite good at seeing the potential in people. And it's not just because the moon is making a sextile to Jupiter, it's also we've got the moon making a sextile to Venus. And so, moon sextile Venus, very sociable aspect, and it does create the possibility of you being able to have a good time in other people's company, and so enjoy what is on offer. And just because someone has been perhaps a little bit boring in the past doesn't necessarily tell you anything about what is happening right now. And one of the things going on today is an aspect between the Sun and Uranus. This Sun-Uranus square is arguably the day's main event. And This Sun square Uranus might say something about the way you talk and what you talk about. Especially as we got a full moon coming up. And while I think it is true that you are very sociable at the moment and you know how to get on with people, some of the things you say might be a little bit inadvisable because of this Sun square Uranus. You might just find yourself focusing on the wrong things. There just might be some detail that maybe isn't important, but you decide to make it important, and because you make it important, then that has repercussions, and those repercussions might not always be great. So do spend a little bit of time thinking about what you're going to say, and also try to remember that your overall view should be broad-minded. It's not a time where you have all the answers. In fact, most people don't have the answers at the moment. Those answers might be crystallizing, perhaps with a full moon, but this full moon is not exact at the moment. And in fact, many Sagittarians might reach the wrong conclusions. There are a lot of things to think about, a lot of things to notice, and making the right choices and the right decisions. Yeah, it could be hard work, but if you don't put yourself in a position where you have to make decisions, then the whole situation is just a lot easier. And when you're considering what's happening today and how you're planning things, try not to be too ambitious, especially when it comes to physical traveling. As a Sagittarius, you have a certain reputation for liking action, for sort of moving from place to place. But yesterday there was a square aspect between Mercury and Uranus. Today there's a square aspect between the Sun and Uranus, and those two aspects kind of gravitate against doing any unnecessary traveling. You might think, oh, it's important to go somewhere, just for 5 minutes, or maybe you want to buy somewhere where, if it might be something quite trivial, going to the shops to buy something or visiting someone. But ask yourself, is it really necessary? And might it be more trouble than it's worth? And that could be a feature of today. Doing something might be short distance traveling. You do it, you think it's going to be fine, and there's a complication. I'm not saying it's going to be a serious complication, but it could certainly be an irritation. And the same might be said for phone calls. I would suggest, Sagittarius, that today you don't make unnecessary phone calls. Sometimes people do have to be called, and you have to receive calls. But if you just call someone up out of the blue and you're kind of interested, you see what happens, you might want to see what happens, things might have a life of their own, and it could take up a lot of your time. So that would really be stirring things up, especially with this Sun square Uranus, and also we do have this build up to the full moon, and so you do need to take things a bit easily here, take it easy here, and not expose yourself to unnecessary stresses or to situations which could get out of control. But that doesn't mean to say that socially it can't be a great day, as I've already suggested right at the beginning of this piece, that socially things can happen and you can enjoy yourself, but avoid drama. There might be drama anyway, but let that drama be about what other people are doing. Don't personalize that drama. I think that would be inadvisable. And let the source of that drama come from outside, not come from within yourself. Capricorn, I'm always a little bit wary when talking about Capricorn. at least recently, because there has been a run, I will admit, with Capricorn where I've not sort of always been entirely positive. I know most Capricorns don't mind. I mean, Capricorn is a fairly realistic sign, and Capricorns can have a somewhat grim view of the future. Grim as in realistic. They see that life is as it is. We're born, we live, we die. That's the way it goes. And so it's not a problem. But still, one tries to be positive. And there's really nothing negative to say about today. But one can at the same time mention some things which might not be absolutely wonderful. There is, I think, today, there is a certain grimness to Capricorns, but I don't mean grim in a bad way. Maybe it's gritty. Maybe it's just seeing the world as it is and seeing, the unpleasantness of the world as it is. I think that is really very clear to you right now. And more so because we've got a run up to a full moon. And this full moon, the moon in Leo, opposition the sun in Aquarius, does allow you to see things how they really are, and it may give you insights into the truth of the matter, and you strip away all the frills, all the sugar coating. It all just goes, and you just see it. You see it, and that's the way it is. And once you know how it is, that really puts you at an advantage. And so that is the positive. If you can see things that other people can't see, then really, Capricorn, you are at such an advantage, and you can take advantage of it in terms of being able to position yourself. Whether that's in terms of whatever your ambitions are. It could be about in terms of money. It could be about status. You can position yourself very well on the basis of knowing the truth, and it's a truth that just some people are in complete denial about, but not you. And the moon does make a sextile to Jupiter. It does make a trine to Venus, and that moon trine Venus may actually be quite reassuring. It allows you to understand the meaning of the word stability, because stability, in a way, it starts with knowledge. If you are unaware, then how can you find stability? Because something's just going to trip you up. But because you are aware, you can find real stability, and you can make things your own, and you can put them in a wrapper where they're controllable by you. And overall, Capricorn, it's that knowledge and it's that awareness that does give you great strength, plus the fact that you're probably prepared to venture into areas that many people just aren't prepared to consider. Or maybe it's a question of, Capricorns rush in where angels fear to tread. But no, Capricorn, you're not going to rush anywhere. You're going to understand the situation, understand it at a very fundamental level, and be able to integrate it and incorporate it, and ultimately, I think, take advantage of it. Aquarius. We have a run-up to a full moon, and we have a full moon. The full moon takes place tomorrow, but still the build-up is very much with us. And so with we've got the moon in Leo. We've got the sun in Aquarius, and this full moon could well be about other people, and there's going to be some focus on relationships, I believe, and you starting to understand, what relationships are about, what their true nature is. And we have a trine between the moon and Venus. So what happens is the moon moves into Leo, makes that trine to Venus, and with that moon trine Venus, it's a pleasant aspect that allows you to really relate to people very well, and by and large you'll know what to say, and you're unlikely to do anything too dramatic, or at least there's no need to do anything too dramatic. With the moon in Leo Aquarius, it's probably not a time where you should feel that you absolutely have to do anything, that there are any sort of dramatic initiatives that you absolutely have to take. I don't think that is necessary, and you should maybe just watch, see what people do, and because it is the full moon coming up. So with full moon, things are a bit up in the air, and that not everything is perfect. You can see that, and you can see that there are things around you that just could be so much better. In fact, in some cases they may be in urgent need of repair. I mean, not necessarily physical repair, but there is a sense of disrepair. It's not your fault, it's not even your responsibility, but you notice it. Things are in a state of disrepair. Things need to be reformed. Things need to be put back together, because if you leave them be, then they will just sort of disintegrate. And that just says something about the world around you, and that's something you very much can see. And so Aquarius, it's probably not a time where you should be making things happen. I mean, there are things should be happening, but I don't think it's up to you to make them happen. Let's see what other people suggest. Let's see what other people do. Once people act, then you can perhaps respond. Now, the main aspect today for everyone, regardless of their sign, is a square between the Sun and Uranus. And this Sun square Uranus certainly has an influence on you. The Sun is moving through Aquarius, your sign. It is making a square to Uranus. And I would see that aspect in a number of different ways. Now, you could say, oh, well, the Sun represents someone else. Sun as ruler of Leo, of your opposite sign, represents someone else, square Uranus. Therefore, you might expect someone to behave in a way that defies your expectations. Or someone might be being unreasonable. But just because someone is being unreasonable doesn't mean that you should overreact. People behave as they think fit. Maybe they behave as they're brought up to behave. And just because what someone does just is at odds with your own standards, it doesn't mean that you should rush to judgment. And maybe you should accept people as they are, and if anyone is saying something, doing something that you take exception to, it might be a good idea to understand their weaknesses. And do understand people's weaknesses. And once you understand people's weaknesses, then you'll be in a better position to understand why they are doing what they're doing. I mean, that is one way in which we could see the sun, Sun square Uranus. Sun square Uranus might also be about you trying to make sense of things, trying to create order, and trying to create a life for yourself that makes sense, and then Uranus comes along and destabilizes it. But Uranus has been in Taurus for quite a long time. In fact, later this year it actually starts to move into Gemini. But while Uranus has been in Taurus, it has asked you questions. It has asked you questions about where you live. What does stability mean? Where do you feel comfortable? Where do you feel uncomfortable? And today, with the Sun square Uranus, these kind of issues may come to the fore. And in fact, they may come to the fore even more so tomorrow, because tomorrow we've got a full moon square Uranus. And so that might be a question, Aquarius, that you want to ask yourself. Do you feel comfortable where you are? Have you stuck it out for long enough? And if you feel uncomfortable, then what are you going to do about it? And that might be a question that in the end you have to ask yourself. Pisces. Pisces, there is a square aspect between the Sun and Uranus today. Now, this Sun-Uranus square doesn't have a direct impact upon you. But still, it affects all of us. It doesn't matter what our sign is. It's there. And this sun square Uranus might indicate that trivial things which you regard as, under normal circumstances, as being really rather unimportant, could actually start to have an impact on you. And you talk to someone, you think it's a trivial exchange, but it's not trivial at all. You go somewhere, you've been to the same place 100 times before, and nothing has happened. This time round, you notice something. Maybe something does happen, but whatever it is, it does give you pause for thought. And so don't think that nothing has a consequence. Everything has a consequence. And if something disturbs you, then in a way, Pisces, you should be happy that you're being disturbed, because where there's a disturbance, there is a possibility of progress. And don't feel that the way everything is arranged right now is the final answer. There's always scope for rearrangement, and don't think that you can make things absolutely perfect, or don't feel that you're trying to live according to a standard which can be perfect. Things can't be perfect, and one reason things can't be perfect is because the ground rules change. Something happens, and you have to make adjustments. You have to start again. So it's a constant process of revising things. And one aspect we have today is a sextile between Moon and Jupiter. We also have a trine between the Moon and Venus. So you could say that there is a very wide sextile between Venus and Jupiter. Venus is at around 4 or 5 Aries, Jupiter is at 11 Gemini, and the Moon kind of brings Venus and Jupiter together. The Moon makes a trine to Venus, and it makes a sextile to Jupiter, and of course Jupiter is your ruler. And I would see these lunar aspects as really working well for you, and it's perhaps about seeing that things aren't great. They may not be terrible, but things could be better. And the Moon making those aspects, particularly that sextile Jupiter, allows you to get things together. and actually to have an inspiration of the way things should be connected, and you do it, and you do your best, and you know it's not going to be perfect, but you know you are responding to the current situation, and what you do is something that in the end works out really well, and you have a sense of satisfaction. Plus, also with this moon sextile Jupiter, there is a possibility that Pisceans might get some insights into their health and their well-being, and they may be able to do something or make a change which makes you feel better, whether on a sort of a physical or psychological level. As usual, I'm not giving any medical advice. It's more about lifestyle and sort of health and well-being. But it does seem that there's just something you can do to sort of help stabilize yourself, to sort of align yourself with what's going on. And of course, it's also preparation for the full moon. Tomorrow is the full moon. That full moon is going to impact everyone, Pisces included. And when I do your horoscope for tomorrow, the full moon is something I will certainly be talking about. And that's it. Those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And I am now going to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 1, the creative. And it is a powerful hexagram. All the lines are unbroken. It's sort of pure energy. It's pure energy in the sense that it can't be described, it can't be defined. It's just completely raw. And that's what we start with. We're really trying to get something together. And we're not quite sure. We're not quite sure where it's going, but we feel that we are very much an actor. It's up to us to make things happen. And we have 3 moving lines, and we have the second line, third line, fifth line moving. And with the second line moving, it's the first moment. It's the first moment of action. We feel that the time has come. We have to do something. And we're just ready. And we're tempted to just go ahead without thinking. But what the I Ching tells us is that on our own, we may not be able to achieve as much as we could. It is a time when it would be useful perhaps to get someone's help, because this is a situation where our strength has been building up, and we now feel that it is a time for action. But if we take that action on our own, we may not get very far, and so perhaps we need some outside assistance. So do consider that. And then we move to the third line, and the third line is about accomplishment, and it's about making progress. We're quite busy, and in terms of the creative, we know what we're trying to, we get an idea at least about what we're trying to initiate. But at the same time, we're quite wary. We know that we might be dealing with fairly dangerous forces, and we have to harness these forces, but also we have to protect ourselves. And that might mean we might be sort of distracted. The I Ching gives us a symbol of sort of working hard during the day, but at nightfall we've got this active mind, but we're also very aware of the dangers, and of the dangers of what we're doing. And probably that's a very good thing. So we move forward, but we move forward very much with our eyes open. And then the fifth line moves. Now, the fifth line in I Ching is often a very good line. It is a good line. And it's suggesting that in terms of what we're trying to do, we're starting to get lucky. Remember, there's a moon sextile Jupiter today. A moon sextile Jupiter is a very fortunate aspect, and we are getting lucky. Things are moving our way. We are making an impact. But that doesn't mean that we need to do everything on our own. And the I Ching does give this advice. Go seek the great man. The I Ching says that a lot, the great man. That could be the great man who has power. That could be the great man who is a sage, who is very wise, who's got advice to offer. Whoever it is, seek the great man. Of course, when I say great man, I'm kind of using I Ching language. There's no reason why the great man has to be masculine. It might be the great woman. So let's sort of move on from the Confucian way of way the I Ching is set up. But someone who we really respect and may know more than us in some areas, and may be prepared to give us good advice. So overall, we have this creative force. It's very powerful. It can really propel us forward. But overall, we shouldn't regard it as being something we have to do all on our own. We can get outside assistance, and also we need to be aware of what might be holding us back, who might be holding us back, because we've got these 3 lines moving, and so with 3 lines moving, we move to a second hexagram, and the hexagram we move to is hexagram 21, which is biting through. And so biting through represents some kind of obstacle. We suddenly meet this obstacle. We're ready to go, we're creative, we move forward, and then we realize that someone is holding us back. And we have to be tough, biting through. We have to address the obstacle. And biting through, as a hexagram, is often connected with punishment. I mean, not punishment for the sake of it. It's because you're biting through someone who is recalcitrant. They're being they've got an attitude, perhaps. They're being difficult, but biting through to that gold, that's what it is, the gold in someone's soul. And so if we want to get people's help, then we have to do something to get through to that. And some people to begin with are not helpful, and perhaps we'll realize that one of the reasons we cannot achieve everything we want to achieve is because we're dealing with people who need to be reformed. And of course, that person who needs to be reformed might be ourselves. And so with biting through, consider what is holding you up, what you have to bite through to. That's the gold at the center of our soul. Well, not necessarily the center of our soul, but it's the goodness in ourselves which is wrapped with this sort of tough leather, but we have to get through that leather. And so be prepared to do that if you want to really unleash your creativity. And now I want to talk about my dog, or rather my first dog as an adult, as a child. We had dogs very briefly. They never seemed to last long. They were sort of taken away for one reason or another. So my first dog as an adult, her name was Cuvi, and that's her picture in the thumbnail. And she was born in Slovakia on December the 13th, 2008. So here is her chart, and I don't know what time she was born, so I've just gone for noon, in a place close to the Slovak city of Liptovský Mikuláš. And so you immediately have this question. You have a dog, and dog is a part of a litter, 6, 7, 8 dogs born at the same time. And it's the same issue with twins and even triplets with humans, but it's kind of more intense. Are these dogs in a litter going to have the same destiny, the same lifespan? Almost certainly not. And so what's the role of astrology here? Well, it may be a bit of an observer effect here. It may be that if you are an astrologer and you have a dog, or even if you consult an astrologer and you have a dog, somehow that dog just relates to the chart, that astrology kind of creates real effects. I'll probably need to talk about that in more detail at a later stage, but it is the germ of a justification there, the beginning of a justification there. But I understand that complexity with litters, and I'm not going to give you a satisfactory answer here. But I would argue that it is worth looking at the chart of one's pets or one's companion animals, or however one wants to see them. And dogs are not going to have Saturn returns, and a large dog is going to be very lucky, very, very lucky to get to its Saturn opposition. It would have to be 14, 15 years old to get to that Saturn opposition, Saturn point in its chart. Because as the vet said, after about 13 large dogs, they tend to die. It just happens for one reason or another. But so here's a chart of Cuvi. I mean, she's a Slovensky Čuvač, so we always called her Cuvi. I mean, that wasn't her official name was Astra, but we never called her Astra. We called her Cuvi, and which is kind of a shame, maybe. But anyway, that's what she was called. So we don't know whether Cuvi had her moon in Gemini or her moon in Cancer. All things being equal, she probably had her moon in Cancer. I would have said that she was quite an introverted dog who took herself quite seriously. I mean, this breed, their job is to protect the flocks of sheep from wolves and bears and that kind of thing. So that is a breed thing. So she did have an introverted streak, but she did have Sun in Sagittarius. And Sun in Sagittarius, well, she did a lot of traveling. She was born in Slovakia. She spent a lot of time in the Czech Republic. She traveled across Europe. She went to the UK. She flew to the US on 2 occasions, and so flying to the US means she had to go via sort of Frankfurt Airport, and so she did a lot of traveling. Some of that traveling was on her own. So she was a traveler, and you would certainly expect that with the Sun in Sagittarius. But the seriousness in this chart is perhaps shown by by the date she was born. In December the 13th, 2008 was, of course, at the time of the great sort of stock market economic crisis. And she was born with the Sun opposition Saturn, and the Sun was also square her Uranus. And so there was a really close T square there when she was born. When we went to pick her up, when she was a puppy. I think she was 4 months old. She knew there was a problem. She skulked away. She was not happy about the situation, and the first couple of days completely traumatized, curled up in a ball. But that was her basic view, and I always felt that she took a rather grim view of the world. But she wasn't a Capricorn. She was a Sagittarius. So those are a few things about her chart. Now, of course, some things are just going to stay as potential. There is not the variety of possibilities that one would happen in a human chart, but that Sun square Saturn is important. Sun square Uranus, Saturn opposition Uranus. This may talk about potential in her life later on. We also have to consider how the dog relates to the owners. So I'm one of the owners. So what does she do to me? What does she do to my chart? And so here's my chart, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the question, what impact did she have on me? And so if I put me in the center of the chart, and we put her on the outer wheel, and so here's the chart. Now I have my Mercury at 19 Gemini, and you can see that her Mars. Well, in fact, she was born of a Mars Saturn square. I think, yeah, Mars Saturn square. Her Mars Saturn. Her Mars is on my Mercury. Her Saturn is on my Mercury. Her where's her Uranus? Where's her Uranus gone? Her Uranus is square. So my Mercury gets really hammered here. It's obviously a big shock to me to have a dog. I mean, really was a big shock. I'm not really a dog person. But Mercury rules the lungs. And when we first got the dog and we were driving back towards Bratislava, I felt a tightening in I have asthma. I'm in mild asthma. As a child, I had it bad at times. But I immediately, in the car, I felt this tightening in my lungs. But, once you've made that choice, once you've made the decision to buy the dog, there's not really much you can do about it, is it? You can't really take the dog back. And perhaps one should have taken the dog back straight away, but we didn't take the dog back. And I didn't say anything, but, I felt this tightening in my lungs. And as you can see, this is a white, fluffy dog. This is like a super allergenic dog that I'd got hold of. So this dog caused asthma. I had to start taking steroid inhalers, antihistamines. It forced me to take medication, which I wouldn't normally have taken, but for a couple of years. And then I would have thought it took me 2 years before my immune system got used to it. And so that might meant then, after a couple of years, I didn't need these inhalers anymore. But it took a long time. I had to really persist. And so now we've got a second dog. I'm not allergic to her, even though I'm a very sort of allergic personality. So you can see in this way how a dog might might have an impact on you, and indeed on one's health. And in terms of allergies, probably, if I'd known about this before the event, I wouldn't have got the dog because of these allergies. And I would have looked at this chart, but maybe it was just something I had to go through. Maybe it gave a boost to my immune system. So this is a first way in which you can use astrology with pets. It doesn't matter if there are 6 dogs in a litter. Do look at how you and the dog relate to each other. And there's also the question of, what actually happens in a dog's life. And I had to go to England in 2017. I had to go for several months. And so I would always take this dog for a walk, and she was not happy when I was gone for 4 months. She'd lost her daily walks, and also, while I was gone, she did herself an injury. She got upset about something, and I think some animals, maybe they were guinea pigs, upset her, and she strained herself, and she did something to her hip. Now, I want to look at that particular event, because that particular event, I don't know exactly when it happened, but it happened around the end of August 2017. So in 2017, she was coming up to her 9th birthday. So she was 8 when this happened. So the dog is getting older here. And Saturn went stationary direct at the end of August. And Saturn went stationary direct at, where did it Saturn go? At 2111 Sagittarius. And so Saturn going 21, going stationary direct, 21 Sagittarius. So that definitely had an impact on her, as you can see. So Tuve's chart is in the middle. And that Saturn went stationary direct. Where's it gone? In Sagittarius, right very close to her sun, and square her Saturn. So that Saturn square Saturn, in a dog's life, Saturn square Saturn is, she was 8 years old. So in a dog's life, Saturn square Saturn is almost like the second or even the third Saturn return. It's almost moving towards the latter stage of a dog's life. And clearly her spirits were not in great form. She wasn't able to, because she perhaps had not been walking so much, and that might not have helped in terms of her hip or what she strained. I mean, it wasn't a serious thing, but it was kind of, like perhaps a slow beginning of the old age of a dog, and so again, do look at those kind of transits, and then you have the other issues that dogs have. So this dog was not spayed, and apparently, if a dog is not spayed, or certainly this breed, or this type of breed, it has a 26% chance of getting breast cancer. And indeed, the dog, a couple of years later, the dog got breast cancer. And breast cancer in dogs is not the same as it is for humans and cats. It's not as I believe it's not necessarily as serious. But here is, so I just wanted to look at the chart of the surgery when the first tumours were taken out. So this was on January the 15th, 2019. So this would have been when she just had her 10th birthday. And so here is the chart for the surgery. I did not choose this time. The vet only had, we had to take whatever spot we could get. So here is a chart for surgery for breast cancer for this dog, and indeed when it was located, and when he started taking stuff out, and there was biopsies, and so this is actually quite a fortunate chart in some respects, because in astrology the seventh house represents the doctor, or in this case the vet, and so seventh house ruler is Jupiter, which is Jupiter. I don't know exactly what time the surgery happened, but I think Gemini was rising. So Jupiter in Sagittarius is the vet doing the surgery. So that would indicate that the vet is sort of honourable, knows what he's doing, and then you also notice that Mars is square Saturn. So Mars square Saturn for this kind of surgery, where you find out that an animal has cancer, or the beginning of that process. And so, if you can, you look at the chart of the surgery. Where is the dog in here? In astrology, a dog is represented by the sixth house. Animals smaller than a goat, maybe up to the size of a goat, are represented by the sixth house. The 12th house represent horses, whales, cattle, larger cattle. Cattle would be 12th house. So a dog is sixth house. So at the time of the surgery, you would take the dog as being ruler of the sixth, Venus. So Venus is in the seventh house. Venus is in the hands of the vet, and Venus is making a conjunction to Jupiter, and Venus is also making a trine to Mars. So that is Venus trine Mars. You could say, well, that is the dog having successful surgery. And so, and also because with Cuvi in her chart, she has Mars. She has a Mars. There's her Mars, and where's her Saturn gone? She's got a Mars Saturn square. So she has this surgery, not a major surgery, but she has surgery when she has Mars Saturn square. So in her case, she had several surgeries for cancer. It seems to be, with her case, every couple of years, every year or whatever, she'd have surgery, and the tumours would be cut out, and then he'd stitch her back together. And then when she got to 13, and 13 is supposed to be the age when that's a good age. I remember when she hit her 13th birthday, the vet sort of did his high fives and said, that's it, job done. She's reached 13. And 13 was the year when she died, and she died she didn't die of cancer. She died of esophagus, whatever that is. Well, no, I do know what it is. It's suddenly she'd lost all motility in her throat. That's what the disease is, and basically she couldn't consume anything anymore. She couldn't eating couldn't happen. So there was no choice. She had to be euthanized. I mean, okay, one could have done perhaps complicated procedures, but it would have made her miserable. And so I thought I would look at the chart of her death. And so here is the chart of her death. Now, I want to use this chart of her death because it does illustrate astrology working incredibly well. So this is the approximate time of she died. At the time she died, I wasn't too bothered about, noting the exact time when she was euthanized. But the thing, there's a Sun-Uranus conjunction today when I'm doing this video, and there was a Sun-Uranus conjunction when she died. So you see, the Sun was a square Uranus. Furthermore, the Sun was opposition Saturn. You can see the Sun was pretty close to the opposition of her Saturn, and the Sun was pretty close to the square of her Uranus. So, in other words, her birth chart and her death chart had real connections with one another. And so, if you to illustrate this point, which may tell us not something about animals, but also humans as well. So, she was born with a close Sun-Saturn square, and she died with a Sun-Saturn opposition. In fact, her Sun-Saturn square was about 21 arc minutes apart, and she was born with, So she was born with a square which is 21 arc minutes apart, and the Sun-Saturn square was, again, the Sun-Saturn opposition when she died was less than a degree out. So she was really resonating to the Sun-Saturn cycle. And remember, when she did her hip in 2017, Saturn was conjunct her Sun. So there is a sort of a powerful linkage there. And additionally, the Sun-Uranus cycle. So she was born with Sun square Uranus, and she died with Sun square Uranus. And whether or not they were aspected is not the point. When you've got a close aspect in your chart, you very often resonate to it. So I think that there was a certain sense of completion. I mean, she died she was 13 and 2. She was 3 months short of her, 4 months short of her 14th birthday. So that's not a bad age for a dog to die at. And so I thought I would just look at her chart with this Sun square Uranus in the sky now, just to illustrate how one might be able to use astrology to make sense of one's companion animals, to make sense of what they're going through, and also to look at how one relates to one's dog or other animals. But what is the connection between your chart and their chart? Anyway, I hope you found that interesting. I just wanted to remind us, or remind you, that humans are not the only living beings with horoscopes. Dogs can have horoscopes, and I don't think that looking at a dog's horoscope or a cat's horoscope or other animals you might have, I don't think that is a trivial exercise. I think it actually can be a very serious exercise. It can give us an idea about events in an animal's life, and in this case, I think one could have used astrology to get an idea about when the dog was vulnerable to injury, and then ultimately vulnerable to dying. And I think that astrology, to an extent, marked out her lifespan. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you found this video interesting. If you enjoyed this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. And I will talk to you again tomorrow.